On this episode, we're taking a look at the new deck builder Dune Imperium that's taking the board gaming world by storm. Is this actually justified, or are people tying it a little bit too closely to that license? Let's find out. Hi, I'm Luke Hector from the Broken Meeple, and just to get it out of the way right now, I've not watched or read a single thing related to Dune. What? Yeah, alright, don't kill me. What can I say? I don't read a lot, and I've never watched the movie. People said it wasn't very good. Same with the mini-series. People said that wasn't that good either. So what do? I've seen the trailer for the new movie, but I know nothing about this universe, and even then the new trailer didn't really impress me that much. So I'll probably watch it, just because it's impossible to watch any film in 2020 and 21 these days. But other than that...
You know nothing, Jon Snow.
All I really know is that it takes place on a desert landscape, and it's got something to do with spice. That's apparently the valuable thing there, and there's giant sandworms. Yeah, that's literally my knowledge of Dune. So as I'm going into a deck build of this, know that if I get any references wrong or don't say anything like that's blatantly obvious to you who know the lore, just bear with me, okay?
Stupid fat hobbit.
Dune Imperium is a deck-building worker placement game that finds inspiration in elements and characters from the Dune legacy, both from the new film from Legendary Pictures and the literary series from Frank Herbert, Brian Herbert and Kevin J. Anderson. You are a leader of one of the great houses of the Landsraad, defeat your rivals in combat, wield political influence and form alliances with the 4 major factions. Your successes will be measured, of course, in victory points. Dune is a game of 2 halves. Deck building first, where you have your starter deck of cards that in much the same vein as other deck builders you try to bolster with new cards and trash old ones. But through these cards, not only do you gain bonuses, but you also gain the ability to place your agents on the board worker placement style in different spots to gain further bonuses that can be used in order to acquire different resources, but also acquire more cards for your deck. One leads to the other in a sense. On top of that, you are also trying to recruit troops that can be placed in the combat zone, where at the end of the round, players will duke it out in order to gain rewards from a set of conflict cards as they arise. As players acquire more cards, they must consider not only the bonuses that they provide, but also the spots on the board that they will be allowed to place their agents while using said cards. It's alright in saying I'll grab the most powerful card that it looks like it's there, but if your intention is to go to a spot by a particular faction and you don't have any cards that have the faction's icon on them, you won't be able to place your agent there. So the game revolves around a careful balance of boosting your deck in order to gain not only decent bonuses, but also the ability to go where you need to go on the board. But then on the worker placement side, you need to be able to go to spots to get the bonuses you want quicker than your opponents can, because much like every other worker placement game, first come, first serve. The conflict phase is pretty simple. Most troops wins. You put troops in your garrison as the round goes on, but you'll also be able to put some of those troops into the middle in the combat zone. Once the conflict phase happens, all you simply do is count up the number of cubes, count up your secondary power track, and once you know who's got the biggest total, that person gets the top reward, and so forth. Also, once the worker placement phase is done, players have the ability to acquire more cards, much like in every other deck building game. You look at the cards available, choose what looks juicy, what you can afford, and place it in your deck, and hopefully, if you can, try to trash out some of the old starter cards which aren't of much use to you anymore. The game is a race to 10 victory points, which will trigger the end of the game, after which there may be some bonus scoring for any objective cards you may have obtained during the game, but of course, what do you think happens to the person with the most?
Of course!
Now, Dune Imperium has a lot to measure up to because there's quite a few light deck builders around when you think about it. So first up, let's start with duration. How long does this game last? Probably in the region of about 45 minutes to an hour and a half tops, depending if you play solo or up to 4 players. That's pretty good going. It shouldn't take much longer than that in any game unless you've got a very slow player or decide to play it on Tabletop Simulator. In fact, seriously, don't play this on Tabletop Simulator. It is way too slow for that. But that's not too bad a length for a small deck builder, although there have been quicker ones. Dominion, Runestone, Star Realms, all of those can be done in much quicker time. Also, I do find with this one that in 4-player especially, the game kind of drags on a little bit too long. The turns are usually quite quick, but as soon as one person gets hosed as to a space they wanted to go to, or can't decide what they want to do, it does hold the game up, because then you get caught in the downtime issue of waiting patiently for somebody to hurry up and for the agents to get back round to you. And also, if you decide to pass early in a round, because people can pass at different times, let's say you've only got 2 agents, somebody else has got 3, and somebody else played a card to return an agent back, you could be sitting there twiddling your thumbs for a little while you wait for the rest of the players to hurry up and finish what they're doing.
I hate waiting.
Dune Imperium is a pretty easy game to grok. There's not a huge amount of rules in this at all, although I would strongly recommend you hose down the knowledge of what in play means. You'll find out when you try it. But there's an icon guide on the back of the rulebook to get through the iconography, which in itself is mostly pretty intuitive, and there's enough examples in the book to learn the game, although it's not the most glamorous of rulebooks, and certainly it's quite text heavy for what is a light deck builder. But if you have any knowledge of these two mechanics or you've played other deck builders before, you're going to pick this up in a mere minutes. Now, this definitely isn't gateway levels of ease, no, definitely not. It's a hybrid game using two very big, strong mechanics. Therefore, it's not going to be anywhere near as easy to teach as something like, say, Dominion or Runestones, which only have you focusing on the one aspect. But compared to a lot of other hybrid games in this category, like Clank, Tyrants of the Underdog, or even the smash hit from last year, Lost Ruins of Arnak, which is definitely more of a mid-weight level game compared to this one that's quite light, still, this one is definitely one of the easier ones to teach and play. So your first concern might be when we talk about tactics and strategy, is there really much to distinguish this from a lot of other deck building games? We've seen plenty of them, and for the most part they tend to do a similar thing of how you acquire cards and how you use them. Here though, there's a little bit of a twist here which I've definitely got to give props for. Here it's not just a simple case of play the card and get whatever power it is. It also has that multi-use aspect, something I really love in games, where you also have to bear in mind the icons down the side that tell you where you can put your agents. I might not care about whether the card gets me a spice or a resource, a solari, I think that's the currency, whatever. Like I say, I don't know the universe, but you're more interested in the icon on the left that says, oh yeah, that allows me to go to the Fremen faction, which means I can get those troops, level up on that faction, so maybe I should hold the card for there. On top of that, you've also got the really cool function of the reveal in play phase, or reveal phase I suppose is more accurate. This is where once you're done with all your worker placement aspects, you then reveal all the cards you didn't play in the round. It's very much a use 'em or lose 'em affair. And the cards that you reveal generate bonuses based on what's on the bottom of the card rather than what's in the center of the card. And then these resources are typically used to bolster you in the pending conflict phase, or more importantly, in my opinion, to get more cards, because I like getting more cards. This means you're left with quite a lot of cool tense decisions about how to use your hand. You only typically have 5 cards, but you can draw more as the phase goes on, and when you're trying to decide whether to play it, or to reveal it, or keep it for a faction, or keep it for its ability, there's some interesting decisions that aren't brain-burny, but they are definitely ones that are going to make you think each round about how you do, how economic your turn is going to be. Because you only have a couple of agents, 3 max in the entire game, and even then, even if you grab like a Mentat, which is kind of like a replacement agent, like a temporary agent, there's still not a huge amount of spaces you're going to go to on that board, so you need to do as much as you can with relatively few actions. The conflict phase is also quite a neat segment where there's a fair amount of tension and even some bluffing ability by the other players. You can grab these intrigue cards during the game which allow you to do special actions at various times, but they also have potential combat bonuses on there that you keep in secret and play them in turn order during the conflict phase. So you may be sitting there with relatively low power, somebody else is cocky and thinks they're going to win the combat, and then during that phase you then play your combat card, add another 6 power to the combat, and it's like, oh, wait, I got nothing. And then you steal the victory from them. So you can get some cool swings of, say, power in that conflict phase. But even then, the conflict phase is another aspect of the game that you got to consider, because it's all well and good saying, well, I did well on the board and I'm getting these cards, but then does that mean you're ignoring the combat and potential rewards that you can get? You don't want to let somebody completely run away with the combat phase, because they'll pretty much win the game outright. So occasionally you do need to jump in. But then how many troops do you commit? Because the troops that you commit go away after the round is done, regardless of whether you win or lose. So you might have a bucket load of troops that you shoved into one combat and won it, but was it worth all the effort to get all those troops in there? You might have just overreached yourself. But then if you can steal, say, a 2nd or 3rd place reward with literally like 1 or 2 cubes in there, you can do pretty well with that level of economy. And then you might save some troops for a later round thinking, well, what am I winning this round? Water? Don't particularly care. Fine, you lot have this little battle. I'll just recruit a bunch of troops, and then when the next card gets flipped, I'm like, right, now I push them all in.
Would this brilliant plan involve us climbing out of our trenches and walking very slowly towards the enemies?
The game does suffer a bit from being a little bit too linear and one note in how it plays. In terms of getting to 10 victory points, there's really only 3 main ways to do it. Firstly, from cards. There is a card that you can buy that gets you victory points. So if you want to do the whole Dominion route of buying the expensive victory point cards, then you can go for mass generation of the resource that gets you more cards. If you feel like being a combat munchkin, then you can just keep bolstering yourself with troops and high power cards and things like that in order to win as many combats as you can, get the bonuses and of course the victory points when those cards frequently turn up in the combat phase. The only other way to get any decent amount of victory points is to go for the factions. Level up in each faction and you can get a maximum of 2 victory points from them, although the last victory point can be stolen from you if someone overtakes you. Other than that, there isn't really many other ways to score points. Yes, there are occasional objective cards in the intrigue card deck in order to score some points, like say if you have more spice than another player you might get a point, but there's not that many of them in the deck and you don't know they're coming and there's no guarantee you're going to be drawing a lot of intrigue cards in the game, so they're just a nice little bonus when you find them as opposed to something you can really base your strategy around. So you're kind of stuck with 3 options and that's it every game. Now I do have to address the controversial elephant in the corner of the room, seriously what's in this coffee I'm drinking, and address the aesthetics. They're not good.
If that is a woman, it does look like she was beaten with an ugly stick.
Sorry, I know some people are kind of like giving this one a free pass in terms of its aesthetics, but personally I think they're terrible.
Oh, yes! I hate this! It is revolting!
This is a very bland, muted looking game. The artwork on the cards does not look particularly great, the board looks boring as anything, and you're stuck with basically little cubes, a couple of little mini wooden workers, and that's kind of it really. Even the cards have black borders on them. I don't remember that sort of thing since like the Star Wars Decipher card game. This isn't something that should be happening in 2021 with this kind of aesthetics. Now don't get on my case about the upgrade pack that they've released, because that does not get you a free pass. Firstly, it's not in the retail box of the game. If it ain't in the retail box, you don't get points for it. But then on top of that, the deluxe pack is another $50, £50 on top of the $50, £50 asking price for the game. This game is good. Not gonna, spoiler alert, it's a good game. But seriously, it is not $100 good. There is no way I am paying $100 for a deck builder that isn't widely expandable. Yes, I did that with things like Marvel Legendary and that in the past, but that was because I was buying all sorts of different cards and having a cool time with it. But if I look at Runestones down there, that is a cool deck builder game that is not costing me $100 for the gorgeous artwork and components that that one has. Now you might be saying, well come on Luke, it's in the Dune universe, that's kind of how it looks. Well then pick a different universe then. Why choose Dune if it looks bland, muted and horrible? Yes, I get it, it's a desert, barren, wasteland planet. Well yeah, there's only so much you can do to brighten up a barren, wasteland, desert planet. Why didn't you choose a different universe? Why didn't you just invent your own sci-fi universe? So okay, alright, let's get off aesthetics and maybe talk about immersion. Maybe this will pick it up a bit. No. And this is not just because I know nothing about Dune, okay? Yes, I admit I know nothing about Dune, so I don't know who these 4 factions are, I don't know what a mentat is, I don't know who these leaders that you can play are. Fair enough. But frankly, it's not like that theme really comes through in anything more than a nice Easter egg when you're playing this game. The 4 factions feel incredibly generic. Yes, one gets you a bit more money than another one that gets you raw water, and this one that lets you do funky things with cards. Yes, they have mechanical differences, and maybe in the books that makes sense, why this faction does this and why this faction does that. But if you are like me and a complete noob to the Dune lore, none of this will make any difference to you while you're playing the game. Why do certain cards give you these bonuses? I don't know. Who's this dude on this card? I ain't got a clue. Yeah, you may know if you know the lore, but then again, it doesn't really help with the theme of the game. It doesn't necessarily keep you immersed or even help you to teach the game really, if like me you know nothing about the lore. Okay, so we didn't do too well in the last 2 categories. Well, how does longevity hold up? Again, slight issues here. Not so much with the cards. The cards aren't too bad. You're not going to buy a ton of them in the game. You won't necessarily see a lot of them in the game, but you will be able to see different cards turn up in different games, and that will give some replay value. As mentioned before, there's not really much variety in the path to victory. You're kind of playing this game deciding whether you're going to go into cards or more into combat, or maybe a mix of that, but the factions are kind of just there. You're going to do the factions regardless of which one of those other 2 you pick. So you're not exactly varying up how the game plays, it's just more what cards you use to facilitate it. but you can also play this solo, and I would dare say the solo mode's actually better than the multiplayer in some respect.
This is why Superman works alone.
In the solo mode, you control 2 other rivals that act similar to other players, but with some exceptions. These get in your way and they generate resources, but they actually do score points, and you are trying to beat them before they get to the 10 victory point mark. So there is an objective, and there's different levels of difficulty. It's a pretty solid mode because they do act similarly to how players would, and all you have to do is just flip the card off this deck, which has 2 parts, a combat side and the normal side, and just follow its instructions where they act slightly differently to a human player. You could just simply get the app from the Direwolf main companion app, which then automates that deck for you, so you don't even have to bother with the deck. You can just chuck it in the box and not care. So in summary, Dune Imperium is a very solid deck building worker placement game, but people are lording over this like crazy, saying it's like one of the best games of 2020, and I'll give it credit, it's a really good game, a great game in fact. But not quite that sort of level. I mean, there are a lot of games that came out in 2020 that I think I would have put above this one in terms of my rating, but also this one is heavily marred by the fact that I was hoping for a more immersive theme and it wasn't there, but also the lack of any major variety in Path to Victory is very one note in how you go through the game, and also, the aesthetics are just so bad. But these grievances are made up for by the fact that the game doesn't take very long to play, it's very easy to learn, has a really good solo mode, and in terms of the tactics and strategy, there's a lot of cool decisions you've got to make with the card system. It's easily my favourite aspect. The conflict phase is pretty cool also, but for me, I just like the idea that you've got not only multi-use cards, but 2 different phases in which to use the cards. It's not just simply discard for no effect, it's actually a case of deciding, I've got 2 uses for how to use the card during the round, but then I also have a 3rd use at the end of the round. That's really cool, you don't see it in a lot of deck builders, if at all really, and it's definitely the highlight of this game. So in summary, I'm giving Dune Imperium a very solid and respectable great rating of 8 out of 10. It just cannot measure up to a distinction level game though. People are comparing this to the Lost Ruins of Arnak. I'm sorry, Lost Ruins of Arnak, yes it's a heavier game, but it completely outclasses this one. This one is still good fun and I do recommend it, but you are definitely not going to get any immersion factor unless you have any knowledge of the Dune lore, and even then it's sparse, and I just cannot forgive these aesthetics, and even then there's only so much replay value in the game, particularly if you don't intend to play it solo. But I still really enjoy it, I'm still going to keep it on my shelf. 8 out of 10 is still a really solid rating, guys, okay? Bear with me here, but I just can't see any reason to give it a 9 or a 10. It's not quite up there with some of the level 9 and 10 deck builders that I have, but it's still on my shelf and it will stay there for some time. So that's my video reviewing Dune Imperium. If you like what you see and I've earned your subscription, please consider subscribing. Don't forget to check out the code in the description to get 5% discount off all games at zatu.co.uk. And of course, check out the rest of my content, including the new Beyond the Base Game series, where I hope to talk about different expansions to board games, what they do, what the pros and cons are, and how they change the game, hopefully for better or worse. So don't forget to check out the rest of the content, but thanks for watching and I'll see you on the next review. And remember, as always, it's only a game. Take care, everyone.